New York City in the early 19th century was a world of possibilities. A metropolis where fortunes were made, power was brokered, and ambitions often trumped morality. In this city of dreams, a young Daniel Edgar Sickles was born on October 20th, 1819. He would rise from these streets to become one of the most notorious, controversial, and unforgettable figures of his time. Born to a wealthy family, Daniel Sickles was not a child of the working class, but of privilege. His father, a patent lawyer and businessman, ensured that young Daniel would be educated, well-positioned to enter the corridors of power. The young Sickles, however, showed early signs of a complex personality that would define his life. A thirst for prestige, a defiant disregard for rules, and a charm that could win over friends and rivals alike. In the 1830s and 1840s, Sickles pursued a career in the law, but it was politics that called to him. New York's political machine, Tammany Hall, was a breeding ground for future leaders and opportunists. Sickles, with his natural charisma and willingness to take risks, quickly rose through the ranks. By 1847, at just 28 years old, he was serving in the New York State Assembly, already gaining a reputation for audacity. Sickles' rise wasn't just about personal ambition. It was about aligning himself with powerful friends and mentors. His connections would prove pivotal in shaping his career. Among these was James Buchanan, a man whose presidency would soon be tied to the greatest crisis in American history, the American Civil War. Sickles would later become one of Buchanan's most trusted confidants, furthering his reputation as a man who could navigate the treacherous waters of national politics. His contemporaries would say, few men could command a room quite like Daniel Sickles. He was a man of grand aspiration, but his ambition would ultimately lead him down a path of personal ruin and, paradoxically, national prominence. The New York Times in 1860. By the 1850s, Sickles was a U.S. congressman from New York, serving under Buchanan's administration. Known for his brash personality, Sickles became an influential, if polarizing, figure in national politics. His role as a trusted ally of the Democrat Party elevated him further into the public eye. Yet behind his public success, Sickles' personal life was rife with instability. His marriage to Teresa Baggiali, a woman nearly 3 decades his junior, was marked by infidelity, scandal, and heartbreak. Their relationship would soon erupt into one of the most shocking events in American history, an event that would forever cement Sickles' name in infamy. The historian Alan Nevins would say, Sickles' rise to power was fueled by ambition, charm, and unshakable belief in his own destiny. But it was his impulsiveness and disregard for societal norms that would come to define both his greatest triumphs and his darkest moments. Daniel Edgar Sickles was born into comfort and opportunity on October 20th, 1819. His family, wealthy by standards of the time, had the means to provide young Daniel with an education and access to powerful connections. His father, George Garrett Sickles, was a successful patent lawyer and businessman, ensuring that his son would be raised in a world far removed from the struggles of working-class New Yorkers. Sickles was sent to the finest schools, where he was trained in the classics and prepared for a life of prominence. He attended New York University briefly, and then transferred to Columbia University, where he began his studies of law. It was during these years that Sickles' bold, confident personality began to take shape. He was intelligent, ambitious, and always eager to make his mark, whether in the classroom or the social scene. After studying law, Sickles gained admission to the New York bar in 1844, But law was just a stepping stone for his true passion, politics. New York's political scene was dominated by the Democrat Party, particularly the powerful Tammany Hall. This machine, known for its mixed political patronage and graft, was the perfect place for a young, ambitious lawyer like Sickles to climb the ranks. In the mid-1840s, Sickles joined Tammany Hall, one of the most infamous political organizations in the country. Tammany was a political powerhouse, and Sickles quickly became known for his charisma, his fearlessness, and his ability to navigate the often corrupt world of New York City politics. He became an ally of Fernando Wood, a rising political star and future mayor of New York, and soon made a name for himself as an up-and-coming political figure. Historian Eric Foner would say, Sickles' early years in Tammany Hall were critical to his political development. He learned how to wield power, how to win elections, and, most importantly, how to survive in the cutthroat world of New York politics. Sickles' hard work paid off in 1847 when he won a seat in the New York State Assembly at just 28 years old. There, he represented the Democrat Party's interests, including the expansion of railroads, support for immigrant rights, and opposition to the growing abolitionist movement. While serving in Albany, he gained a reputation as a fiery, passionate speaker, known for his ability to debate on the assembly floor. His time in the state assembly cemented his role as a rising star in New York politics. But it wasn't just in Albany where Sickles thrived. His connections to Washington, D.C., particularly with future President James Buchanan, were just as crucial to his meteoric rise. Sickles and Buchanan developed a close political alliance, one that would shape his career in ways no one could predict. Sickles' connection with powerful figures like James Buchanan paid off. In 1853, Buchanan, then serving as the U.S. Minister to the United Kingdom, appointed Sickles as his Secretary of the U.S. Legation in London. For a young, ambitious man like Sickles, this was a golden opportunity to establish himself on the international stage and cement his status as a rising political star. In London, Sickles once again demonstrated his political skills. He charmed the British high society and mingled with some of the most powerful figures in Europe. Even Queen Victoria was reportedly impressed by Sickles' wit and eloquence. His time abroad only deepened his confidence, and upon returning to the United States, Sickles was ready to continue his rise within the Democrat Party. In 1856, Sickles was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, representing New York's 3rd District. He quickly became known for his fierce loyalty to the Democrat Party and his opposition to the abolitionist movement. He supported James Buchanan in his successful bid for the presidency and became one of Buchanan's most trusted political allies in Washington. Yet even as Sickles rose in political power, his personal life remained tumultuous. His relationship with his wife, Teresa Bajoli, was already becoming strained, and soon a scandal of unprecedented proportion would bring Sickles back into the national spotlight for all the wrong reasons. Sickles' contemporaries would say, Daniel Sickles was a man of contradictions, brilliant and ambitious, but also reckless. His ability to ascend the political ladder was unparalleled, yet his personal flaws would prove his undoing. By the late 1850s, Dan Sickles was firmly entrenched in the political elite of Washington, D.C. He had the ear of President James Buchanan, a seat in the House of Representatives, and a beautiful young wife, Teresa Bajoli, whom he had married when she was just 16. But despite the image of a perfect political couple, their marriage was anything but harmonious. Teresa, neglected by her husband and often alone in the city, filled with political intrigue, caught the attentions of a man whose involvement with her would shake the nation to its core. Philip Barton Key. Philip Barton Key, son of famous Francis Scott Key, was a well-known figure in Washington social circles. Handsome, charming, and a frequent guest at elite gatherings, Key quickly became a close friend to Teresa Sickles. As Sickles threw himself deeper into political career, Philip Key and Teresa began an affair, one that would eventually lead to tragedy. Sickles' contemporaries would say, Mrs. Sickles and Mr. Key were often seen together, their conversations too intimate for mere acquaintances. Whispers began to circulate around Washington, but few dared to speak it openly. Their affair soon became an open secret among Washington's elite. Philip Key would stand outside the Sickles home in Lafayette Square, signaling Teresa with the wave of a white handkerchief. The sight of the Key waiting outside her house became commonplace, but for months, Sickles remained unaware of the affair that was unfolding right under his nose. Daniel Sickles, engrossed in his political ambitions, was oblivious to his wife's infidelity. It wasn't until February of 1859 that he finally learned of the affair. A mysterious letter, delivered anonymously, informed Sickles of the ongoing relationship between his wife and Philip Barton Key. The letter detailed an affair in shocking specificity, and Sickles, once a powerful politician, was reduced to a man consumed by rage and humiliation. In an explosive confrontation, Sickles confronted Teresa. She tearfully confessed to the affair, confirming every detail that Sickles had read in the anonymous letter. Sickles was not just enraged, he felt utterly humiliated. The betrayal wasn't just a personal, it was public. In Washington, such scandals traveled quick, and Sickles knew his reputation was at stake. Sickles himself would say, "She confessed it all, and I felt as if the world had fallen upon me. My mind was set on one thing, and one thing only: vengeance." On February 27th, 1859, Daniel Sickles could no longer contain his fury. Armed with a revolver, he marched to Lafayette Square, where he knew Key would be. Key, oblivious to the storm that was about to strike, was calmly walking through the square. He had done so many times before, but this time Sickles was waiting. In broad daylight, and within sight of the White House, Sickles confronted Philip Key. "You have dishonored my home," he shouted, brandishing the letter that exposed the affair. Before Key could respond, Sickles pulled a revolver and fired. Key was struck in the chest, staggering back in shock. Sickles fired again, and then a third time. Philip Barton Key fell to the ground, dead. Washington was horrified. The Washington Evening Star on February 28th would publish, "Never before had the nation witnessed such a public act of vengeance. Sickles had gunned down his wife's lover in cold blood, and the streets of Washington were buzzing with scandal." Daniel Sickles was immediately arrested. He made no attempt to flee, still clutching the revolver that had ended Key's life. Within hours, news of the murder had spread across Washington, and soon the entire nation was gripped by the scandal. Newspapers from coast to coast reported the sensational crime, and Sickles was suddenly the center of one of the most infamous murder trials in American history. The public was horrified and fascinated by the story. How could a man of such prominence, a congressman with a rising political career, commit such a brazen act of violence? And yet, as Sickles prepared for his trial, the question on everyone's mind wasn't just whether he was guilty, but whether he could convince a jury that the action was justified by the ultimate betrayal. Historian Edward Steers would comment, Sickles' murder of Philip Barton Key was not just a crime of passion. It was a moment that revealed the deep cultural tensions of the time. Honor, masculinity, and reputation were at stake, and Sickles was about to challenge the very legal boundaries of self-defense. By the time Daniel Sickles' trial began in April of 1859, the entire country was captivated. Newspapers called it the trial of the century, and Sickles was the center of it all. Both hero and villain, in a drama that was unfolding in real time. The charge was murder, but Sickles and his defense team had a strategy that would make legal history. They would argue the killing of Philip Barton Key was justified by the intense emotional turmoil caused by Key's affair with Sickles' wife Teresa. Sickles assembled a legal dream team to defend him, including Edwin Stanton, a rising legal star who would later become Lincoln's Secretary of War. Stanton and his colleagues argued that Sickles, consumed by temporary insanity after discovering his wife's betrayal, was not legally responsible for his actions. This defense was based on the unprecedented claim of emotional distress. It was revolutionary for its time. Edwin Stanton would say, "Can it be said that a man who is driven to the edge of reason, whose heart has been torn apart by the most vile of betrayals, is truly guilty of murder? No, gentlemen of the jury. Daniel Sickles was out of his mind with grief." Central to Sickles' defense was the anonymous letter that had informed him of the affair. This letter, given to Sickles just days before the murder, described Key's and Teresa's secret meetings in vivid detail. Stanton argued that this letter had shattered Sickles' mental state, leaving him temporarily insane and incapable of rational thought when he confronted Key in Lafayette Square. The prosecution, led by Robert Ould, took a different view of the events. They argued that Sickles had acted with a clear intent, that the murder was premeditated, and that Sickles had no legal right to take the law into his own hands. To them, the killing of Philip Key was an act of vengeance, not a moment of insanity. Robert Ould would say, "The law is clear, gentlemen. No matter the grievance, no matter the betrayal, a man has no right to take the life of another. Mr. Sickles acted not in self-defense, but out of cold-blooded revenge." Perhaps the most sensational moment of the trial came when Teresa Sickles was called to testify. Her confession of the affair with Philip Barton Key was explicit and devastating. She described how Key had courted her, their secret meetings, and how they had carried on their relationship under the very nose of her husband. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as Teresa, weeping, laid bare the details of her betrayal. Teresa would say, "I was wrong. I gave in to my emotions, and I wronged my husband. But I never meant for this tragedy to happen." Teresa's testimony was a turning point in the trial, and it fueled the media firestorm surrounding the case. Across the country, the Americans debated the trial's moral and legal implications. Was Sickles a heartbroken husband pushed to the edge? Or was he a calculating killer who had used the excuse of betrayal to commit murder? In his closing argument, Edwin Stanton made a final, impassioned plea to the jury. He argued that Sickles had acted in the heat of passion, driven by an emotional devastation that no man should be expected to endure. He invoked the concept of honor, a key cultural value at that time, and asked that jury whether any man in Sickles' position could have acted differently. Stanton would say, "Honor, gentlemen, is the very fiber of a man's soul. Philip Barton Key violated Daniel Sickles' honor in the most despicable way. And in that moment, Sickles was not a congressman, but a man, a husband, stripped of everything he held dear. After just an hour of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Not guilty. Daniel Sickles was acquitted of murder, the first man in American legal history to successfully use the defense of temporary insanity. The verdict was met with mix of shock and applause in the courtroom. The New York Times in April of 1859 would publish the following: "The acquittal of Daniel Sickles has set a dangerous precedent. The man may kill another, and the law will forgive him if he can claim the honor was at stake." Sickles walked free, but the verdict left the nation divided. Some saw him as a man who had defended his honor in the face of betrayal, while others viewed him as a dangerous example of a man who had manipulated the law to escape justice. Regardless, Sickles had made legal history, and his name would forever be associated with the trial that reshaped the American legal system. The trial of Daniel Sickles did set a legal precedent that would endure for generations. The idea that emotional distress could serve as a defense for murder. But for Sickles himself, the trial was just one chapter in a life that would continue to be marked by both triumph and scandal. After his sensational acquittal for the murder of Philip Barton Key, Daniel Sickles attempted to return to his political career, but the scandal of the trial lingered. Yet in 1861, as the United States teetered on the brink of disunion and the Civil War began, Sickles found an opportunity for redemption. His tarnished reputation could be restored on the battlefield when President Abraham Lincoln called for volunteers to preserve the Union. Sickles, always drawn to the public eye, saw his chance. Despite his lack of formal military experience, Sickles was a natural leader. Drawing on his charisma and connections, he quickly raised a regiment of volunteers from New York City, dubbed the Excelsior Brigade. These men were fiercely loyal to Sickles, and he was soon promoted to the rank of Brigadier General. Now, Daniel Sickles was no longer a politician. He was a Union general, leading men into battle. Sickles would say, "I have no more desire to be a congressman than a dead man. The Union is in danger, and I intend to fight." Sickles' first taste of battle came during the Peninsula Campaign of 1862 as part of George G. McClellan's Army of the Potomac. Sickles and his brigade fought in a series of bloody engagements against Confederate forces in Virginia. Though his military inexperience occasionally showed, Sickles' courage under fire won him the respect of his men. He was eager to prove himself as more than just a political figure. He wanted to be remembered as a warrior. At Fredericksburg, Sickles once again distinguished himself, leading his men into the teeth of the Confederate defenses. He was undeterred by overwhelming carnage around him. Although the Union suffered a disastrous defeat in the battle, Sickles emerged with his reputation as a capable commander intact. His superiors took note of his abilities to inspire troops, and his political connections didn't hurt him either. One of his soldiers would go on to say, "General Sickles was fearless. He rode up and down the line under fire, shouting at us to hold our ground. We would have followed him anywhere." In early 1863, Sickles had risen to the rank of Major General, a rapid promotion for someone who had been not formally military trained. Now commanding the 3rd Corps of the Army of the Potomac, Sickles found himself at the center of the Army of the Potomac's strategic planning. Yet, his rise in rank also brought him into conflict with other generals, some of whom questioned his qualifications and impulsive decision-making on the battlefield. General Joseph Hooker would say, Sickles is brave, no doubt about that, but his impulsiveness worries me. He'll take risks that others won't, for better or worse. In June of 1863, Daniel Sickles and his Third Corps were marching towards what would become the most famous battle of the Civil War, Gettysburg. For Sickles, it was not just another engagement. It was an opportunity to prove himself as the war's great commanders. But in the chaos of the war, Sickles would make a decision that would define his legacy for better or for worse. As the Union Army and the Confederate Army began to converge on Gettysburg, Sickles was faced with a dilemma. His orders were to hold his corps along Cemetery Ridge, but Sickles believed the terrain left of his men vulnerable. What he would do next would have profound consequences, both for the battle itself and for Sickles' own future. Sickles would say, "I do not see how I can stay where I am without being destroyed or forced to fall back." Daniel Sickles' journey from scandal-ridden politician to Union general had been one of determination and boldness, but in the summer of 1863, at Gettysburg, Sickles' willingness to defy orders would lead to one of the most controversial decisions in military history, one that would forever cement his place in the history books. As July 1st, 1863 dawned, the quiet of Gettysburg was shattered by the roar of cannons and the clash of muskets. The small Pennsylvania town was about to become the focal point of a conflict that would determine the fate of the Union. For Major General Daniel Sickles, the battle was more than just another engagement. It was a chance to assert his strategic vision, but also a stage where his controversial decisions would come under intense scrutiny. When Sickles arrived at Gettysburg, he was tasked with holding the left flank of the Union Army, anchored on Cemetery Ridge. However, Sickles, ever maverick, believed the position was too vulnerable. He argued that the high ground of Little Round Top and other areas to the south were crucial for holding the Confederate advance, and he made the bold decision to move his troops forward from their original position. Sickles would write, "We must hold the high ground. The enemy will exploit any weakness in our lines, and this ridge is too exposed." Sickles' decision to advance his corps created a significant gap in the Union lines. His new positions, while offering a better view of the Confederate approach, extended the Union line and left the center and right flanks more vulnerable. General George Meade, the commanding officer of the Army of the Potomac, had not authorized this move, and the change in strategy would have far-reaching consequences. As the Confederate Army in Northern Virginia prepared to launch its assaults, the stage was set for this monumental clash. Lee's strategy hinged on exploiting the gaps in the Union lines. With Sickles advancing, creating a vulnerable flank, the Confederates saw an opportunity to strike decisively. The ensuing battle would test Sickles' judgment and resilience of his troops. Lee would say, "We must press the advantage while we have it. The enemy's lines are extended, and this is our chance to break through." The battle began in earnest on July 2nd with fierce fighting erupting in the areas where Sickles' corps had been repositioned. The Peach Orchard and wheat field became focal points of the Confederate attack, and Sickles' decision to advance would prove costly. The Confederate forces, led by James Longstreet, attacked with overwhelming numbers and ferocity, and Sickles' troops found themselves fighting desperately to hold their new positions. A soldier from Sickles' corps would say, "The Confederate onslaught was relentless. We were holding our own for a while, but they kept coming, and we were stretched too thin." In the midst of the chaos, Sickles himself was severely wounded by a cannonball that shattered his right leg. Despite the severity of his injury, he refused to leave the battlefield until he was physically carried away. His injury was a testament to his bravery, but it also marked a turning point in the battle, as his absence left his corps in a precarious position. Meade, while referring to Sickles, would say, Sickles' decision to advance was ill-advised, but his courage under fire was undeniable. We'll just have to adjust our strategy accordingly. The heavy fighting around Sickles' new position resulted in heavy casualties on both sides, but the Union line held firm. By the end of the battle, the Confederate assault had been repulsed, and the tide of battle had turned. The cost of Sickles' decision was significant, with his corps suffering severe losses, but the Union Army emerged victorious. A Civil War historian would later say, Gettysburg was not just a turning point in the war, but in Sickles' career. His controversial decisions and the resulting losses were the subject of intense debate, but his bravery and sacrifice on the battlefield were acknowledged by many. The Battle of Gettysburg was a pivotal moment for Daniel Sickles, a man whose boldness and controversial decisions on the battlefield left a lasting legacy. Although his actions led to intense scrutiny and debate, Sickles' courage and sacrifice were emblematic of the broader struggle of the Civil War, where personal and strategic decisions would shape the course of American history. The aftermath of the Battle of Gettysburg was a somber reflection of the war's brutal reality. The once quiet fields of Pennsylvania were now littered with the remnants of the fierce combat. For Major General Daniel Sickles, the battle had been both a test of his military prowess and a harbinger for controversy. As he recuperated from his severe wounds, the fallout from his decision on the battlefield began to unfold. Sickles' recovery was slow and painful. The loss of his leg was a severe blow, both physically and symbolically. Despite his injury, Sickles remained engaged with the ongoing developments of the war and the fallout of his actions at Gettysburg. His decisions to advance his corps had drawn significant criticism from his peers, and he faced a wave of scrutiny upon his return. Sickles, in correspondence, would say, I am recovering, but the price I paid for my decisions is steep. The battlefield is harsh, and even the most valiant efforts are subject to criticism. The controversy surrounding Sickles' decisions at Gettysburg did not end with the battle. In the wake of his return to duty, Sickles faced a court-martial for his actions. The proceedings were closely watched and wildly debated, reflecting the deep divisions within the Union Army and the political complexities of the war. In reference to Sickles, George Meade would say, Sickles' actions were insubordinate, but his bravery and sacrifice cannot be denied. We must weigh his contributions to the battle against the consequences of his decisions. During the court-martial, Sickles defended his actions by arguing that the advance had been necessary to protect the Union Army from an imminent Confederate threat. He contended that his decision, though unconventional, was made with the best interest of the Union in mind. The trial became a microcosm of the broader debate about military leadership and strategy. Military historians would say, Sickles' court-martial was such a trial of military strategy as it was of his personal conduct. It highlighted the often contentious nature of wartime leadership and the complexities of making split-second decisions under fire. Ultimately, Sickles was acquitted of charges related to his battlefield decisions. However, the court-martial left an undeniable mark on his reputation. Although he returned to duty, he never fully regained his former prominence. His role in the battle remained a point of contention, and he continued to grapple with the implications of his controversial command. Sickles on his legacy would say, the battlefield is unforgiving, and history often judges with a harsh hand. I made my decisions with the best intentions, but the weight of history is a burden I must carry. In the years following the war, Sickles sought to preserve his memory of the battle and its participants. He attended reunions, gave speeches, and contributed to the commemoration of Gettysburg. Though his actions remained controversial, His commitment to honoring the sacrifices made on the battlefield became a defining part of his legacy. One of his biographers would say, Sickles' legacy is complex, marked by both controversy and courage. His actions at Gettysburg were a testament to his boldness, but also the risk of defying orders in the heat of battle. His life after the war reflects a man who sought to reconcile his wartime decisions with a legacy of valor and service. Today, the battlefield of Gettysburg stands as a solemn reminder of the sacrifices made during the Civil War. Daniel Sickles' legacy, too, is etched into hallowed ground. His story is one of bravery, controversy, and enduring quest to understand the complexities of leadership in the time of profound conflict, as history continues to reflect on his contributions. Sickles remains a symbol of the intricate and often contentious nature of wartime decision-making. The Civil War ended, but Daniel Sickles' story was far from over. After the guns fell silent, Sickles returned to civilian life, once again embracing the political stage with characteristic boldness. His journey, however, was marked by new challenges, shifting ambitions, and a dedication to preserving the legacy of the war that defined his life. In 1869, Sickles was appointed U.S. Minister to Spain, a prestigious role that placed him at the center of European diplomacy. As a staunch supporter of President Ulysses S. Grant, Sickles used his position to strengthen U.S.-Spanish relations, playing a significant role in key negotiations during Spain's volatile political period. Historians would say, Sickles was a larger-than-life figure in Spain. His charm and his tenacity made him an influential diplomat, especially during negotiations regarding volatile Cuban question and Spain's colonial struggles in the Caribbean. However, Sickles' diplomatic tenure was not without scandal. His personal behavior, especially his relationship with prominent Spanish figures, became the subject of gossip and controversy. Still, his charm and connections kept him in favor, and he remained a visible figure in international politics. After returning from Spain, Sickles continued his public life, becoming an advocate for veterans and a prominent figure in the Civil War memorialization, specifically in the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic. His most enduring legacy would be tied to one of the nation's most hallowed grounds, Gettysburg. As a key figure in the Gettysburg battlefield's preservation, Sickles played a central role in ensuring the site became a national park. He lobbied Congress relentlessly, and in 1895, the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association was officially transferred to the War Department, making the beginning of its preservation as a national treasure. Despite his controversial role in the battle itself, Sickles' commitment to safeguarding the memory of Gettysburg remains one of his most lasting achievements. Historians would say Daniel Sickles, though controversial in life, was a champion of preserving the memory of the American Civil War. His efforts were instrumental in the creation of the Gettysburg National Military Park, a site that continues to honor those who fought and died there. In his later years, Sickles remained a visible and vocal advocate for veterans. He participated in numerous memorials, gave speeches about the war, and continued to defend his actions at Gettysburg. Though time had not erased the controversy of his past, Sickles embraced his role as a keeper of the war's memory. Daniel Edgar Sickles died on May 3rd, 1914, at the age of 94. His passing marked the end of an extraordinary life, one that spanned the American Civil War, international diplomacy, and the ongoing struggle to preserve the nation's history. Though his legacy remained controversial, his contribution to American history, especially the preservation of Gettysburg, could not be denied. Sickles was a man of contradictions, both a hero and a scandalous figure. He was brave, reckless, and determined to leave his mark on history. In the end, Daniel Sickles ensured that his name would be forever tied to the most iconic battlefield in American history, historians would say. Today, Daniel Sickles rests in Arlington National Cemetery, a reminder of a man whose life was marked by boldness, controversy, and a lasting commitment to preserving the history he helped shape. His story remains a testament to the complexities of leadership, the cost of war, and the enduring power of memory. The legacy of Daniel Sickles, like the battlefield he fought on, is marked by both valor and controversy. As time passed, historians and scholars have continued to grapple with the implications of his decisions at Gettysburg and his broader contributions to the Civil War. Today, his story serves as a lens through which we view the complexities of leadership, the harsh realities of battle, and the enduring quest for historical understanding. In the years following the war, Sickles' legacy has been the subject of ongoing historical debate. Scholars have sifted through battle reports, personal letters, and military records to evaluate his role at Gettysburg. This process has illuminated both the strategic brilliance and controversial aspects of his command. One historian would say, Sickles' decisions at Gettysburg were driven by complex interplay of personal conviction and tactical consideration. His actions were both a reflection of his audacity and a cautionary tale of the risk involved in defying orders. Modern historians continue to debate Sickles' legacy, weighing his tactical decisions against the broader context of the battle. His advance on July 2nd, while controversial, was also seen as a bold move that disrupted Confederate plans. Today's scholars examine his actions not just as a tactical blunder, but as a testament to the dynamic, unpredictable nature of warfare. Sickles' advance was a gamble that did not pay off in his short term, but it also forced the Confederates to engage in a way they had not anticipated. His actions reflected uncertainty and high stakes of battle, where decisions often have mixed outcomes. The legacy of Daniel Sickles is preserved not only in books and articles, but also through reenactments and historical presentations. The living history events offer a way for people to engage with the past and understand the complexities of decisions made on the battlefield. A reenactor of a soldier in Sickles' Corps would say, bringing Sickles to life helps grasp human side of history. It's important to understand the personal struggles and motivations behind the decisions that shape the course of events. Sickles' legacy extends beyond the battlefield, and the history books, his family and descendants have played a role in preserving his memory and in exploring the impact. Through personal anecdotes and family history, we gain insight into how Sickles' actions have been viewed by those closest to him. One of Sickles' descendants would say, "My family has always been proud of our connection to Daniel Sickles. While there were controversies, we remember him as a man who took bold actions and played a significant role in American history." Today, memorials and historical sites dedicated to Sickles continue to honor his contribution to the American Civil War. These places serve as a reminder of his complex legacy and the broader context of the Civil War. Park ranger and historian at Gettysburg would say, the story of Daniel Sickles is a vital part of Gettysburg history. Understanding his decisions and their impact provides valuable lessons about leadership and the nature of war. As the sun sets over Gettysburg, the echoes of the past linger in the quiet fields and solemn monuments. Daniel Sickles' story, with all of its complexities and controversies, is woven into the fabric of American history. His life and legacy continue to provoke throughout and inspire reflection, reminding us of the enduring significance of those who shaped the course of the nation. Modern historians reflecting on Sickles will say, Daniel Sickles' life is a reminder of the often turbulent and multifaceted nature of history. His contribution, both controversial and courageous, highlight the human dimensions of a historical event and the ongoing quest to understand our past. Thank you for joining us as we explored the life and legacy of Major General Daniel Sickles. His story sheds light on the complexities and sacrifices of those who shaped our history. If you enjoyed this video and want to help preserve the sites that keep our history alive, consider contributing to our National Parks Preservation Fund. Your support ensures that these important sites remain protected and accessible for future generations. To support our National Parks Preservation Fund and help maintain the rich tapestry of our historical sites, visit the link in the description below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all of our latest content. You can also tune into our podcast, the History with Tim podcast, for deeper dives into historical events and figures. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Keep exploring history and supporting the preservation of places that tell our story.